Welcome to Jackie's Craft Table. Hello, thanks for joining me today. I'm playing with the Monster Sized stamp set again. This time I'm creating a Valentine's Day card. I knew this set would lend itself very well to stacking. It's one of my very favorite techniques, and I'm just stacking my images one on top of the other. A few of the monsters in this set already have their arms raised up, so it was very easy to stack these, and it turned out really cute. I've done this before with another set, and I'll link to that at the end of this video. I hadn't done this for a while, and so what I had to remember was you start from the top and then put the mask on your first image, and then just keep working your way down. This card isn't my standard A2 sized card, which is 5.5 by 4.25. This was a little bit bigger, so this card is going to end up being 4.5 by 7.5. All of my stacked characters would not fit on an A2 sized card, so I improvised. You can see that the paper kind of hangs off the edge of my mini Misty. It doesn't impede my stamping at all. I just make sure to keep my paper against the edge on the right. Then I can slide the paper up as I stamp out each character. I just selectively masked my little characters. Kind of the lazy way to do it, but it worked at the time. At the time, I thought it would be enough, but later on, I decide to go in with some Distress Oxide inks and blend around them, so I do end up cutting all of it out, but I needed the practice for fussy cutting. I'm stamping them onto a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock. I'm going to color in these little guys with my Zig markers. I haven't used those in a good while, so I thought it was time to pull them out. The ink I'm using is Extreme Black ink from MFT. Now I can pull off all of my masks, and what I'm left with is this darling row of monsters. I think it looks so cute and whimsical. I love how this second monster is stepping on the horns of the monster on the bottom. It's just so cute. I do come in with a Copic multiliner to fix where some of the hands and feet meet. Sometimes the masks can get in the way of a clear stamping, but that's really easy to fix. So while this ink is drying, and it doesn't take too long, but I do like to give it a little bit of time to dry, especially on the Bristol Smooth cardstock, because it does have a coating on it. However, it gave me time to finish cutting out the rest of my masks. So my masks are back on again, and I'm starting out with some Distress Oxide called Candied Apple on the bottom. I'm going to do an ombre effect on this card, so I'm starting out with my darkest color first. I figured that since I was already using this Bristol Smooth cardstock, I might as well do some ink blending. It's so easy to ink blend on this paper because of the coating, like I mentioned. It just goes on creamy and smooth, and you are left with absolutely no harsh lines. My mid-tone color is Abandoned Coral, and then the lightest color I'm using is Worn Lipstick. These three colors blend perfectly to create a cute ombre background, perfect for Valentine's. Now I can remove my masks once more, and it shows the perfectly protected, crisp white images under it. I'm doing some very simple watercoloring with these Zig markers. I'm going in with my darkest tone first. I'm using turquoise green here, and then I can just pull out the pigment with my water brush. These brushes are very fun and easy to use, especially on this paper. I'm going to use a little bit of gray and light gray on each monster just to kind of pull them together. This is a wine red marker that I'm using to color in their mouths. And I don't use the water brush on all of them. On some of the monsters, I'll use a dark tone and then a light tone brush just to pull out the pigment. I'll turn on some music for a minute while I finish up my coloring. This was one of those cards where you just start coloring and you don't really plan ahead. But I decided to come in with some white embossing powder and put the sentiment right onto the edge of this panel. So I'm putting down some anti-static powder first, and then I'm coming in with some Versamark ink to ink up my sentiment. And it's the perfect sentiment for this card. It says, "My love for you is monster sized." And I'm going to stamp that twice up the side of this panel. After I stamp it out once, I'm going to come right in with my embossing powder and then melt that with my heat tool. And it melts really fast if you make sure to give your heat tool time to heat up. The Mini Misty really comes in handy because I can just slide down this card panel, and I know that my second stamping of this sentiment is going to be stacked perfectly above the first one. So I stamped it again with Versamark ink, and then I can just pour a little bit more of the embossing powder over it. My two sentiments stacked like this kind of remind me of a measuring stick, kind of measuring the monsters and how tall they are. I'm going to work on my card base now, and I'm using a piece of MFT's Poppy Red cardstock for this. I'm cutting it down to 7.5 by 9, and then I can just score it in the middle at 4.5. I like to use my paper trimmer as a scoreboard. I just measure where I want it scored, and then I come in with the bone folder and score that. If I don't score it first, then this paper will crack when I fold it in half. This paper is really thick. I also use this paper trimmer to fold it. I just butt it up against the ridge of the paper folder there, and it holds the two edges of my card so that I could fold it over perfectly. The next piece of cardstock that I'm using is from Simon Says Stamp, and it's called Cotton Candy. I'm cutting this piece of paper down so that it's 1/8 of an inch smaller than my card base. I'm also cutting down my card panel so it's another 1/8 of an inch smaller than my pink cotton candy cardstock. And you can see there on the back that I did a little practice stamping. I didn't want to waste the paper, so I just flipped it over and tried again. I'm using Tombow Extreme Tape Runner on the back of this, and I'm going to start putting my card together. I'm just eyeballing it to center each piece of paper on top of the next one. I'm not using any hearts on this Valentine's Day card, but I think there's enough pink and red involved that it kind of indicates that it's for that occasion. Because this is an odd-sized card, I need to create an envelope for it. I have a We Are Memory Keepers punch board. I've had it for a while, and it's very fun to play with to create your own envelopes. I'm going to show you really quickly how I created an envelope for this card. It shows the different dimensions on the side, and I just looked up 4.5 by 7.5, and it tells me what size of paper I need to use for this envelope. I'm using a piece from one of my 12 by 12 inch paper pads. So I put my paper at the 3 7/8 mark. This is where I need to score it and then punch it. And it punches out a little divot for your envelope. Then I flip my paper and I'm lining up my score mark to the scoring on this other side. And then I can score it once more and punch it. And you do this until all 4 sides are completed. This is a very thin piece of patterned paper. Most envelopes are very thin, so this works out just fine, but I wanted to have the pattern on the inside of my envelope. Now that I'm finished with scoring and punching the envelope, this punch board has a really nice feature on it, and it allows you to round the corners of your envelope. I put it on the wrong side here. This punch board also creates boxes, and this side cuts the corner attachment slits, but it's the left side that you want, and it just rounds the corners perfectly. Now I'm pulling out my bone folder again, and this will just help me fold over my scored edges and smoothen them out. I'm going to be using some score tape to put this envelope together. Score tape is very strong, and I know that as it goes through the mail, it's going to hold my envelope together. And isn't that cute? It's really fun making all of these different sized envelopes. So I'm putting the score tape on the sides of my envelopes. Now I can pull off the release paper, and then I'm going to hold everything down flat and push that down so it adheres. Since I'm not ready to seal my envelope and send it out in the mail yet, I'm going to add a little bit of more score tape to the top, but I'm going to leave the release paper on until I'm ready to mail out my card. I'm going to put my card inside just to show you what a perfect fit this is. And that's ready to be addressed and mailed out. So I was looking at my card and I decided the sentiment didn't pop enough for me. So I'm going to mask around it and add some more candied apple just over the sentiment strip. And I'm putting it down rather thickly because I really want this sentiment to pop. It does cover up the white embossed sentiment, but you can go in with a clean cloth and just buff that off. Now this card is complete. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can also click on the bell if you'd like to be notified when I publish a new video. And don't forget to share this video on your favorite social media. I hope you enjoyed this card video, and I hope you all have a wonderful week. Bye!